behind the golden glow of old Hollywood, beyond the red carpets, the flashing cameras, and the timeless glamour, lurked a darker truth. Beneath the tuxedos and evening gowns, some of the biggest stars of the silver screen shared whispers, drinks, and dangerous favors with the most powerful crime families in America. These weren't just movie roles, they were real connections forged in smoky backrooms, mob-run casinos, and whispered phone calls. This is the untold story of 20 Hollywood legends and their chilling ties to the Mafia. Marilyn Monroe, allegedly connected through the Kennedys and mob intermediaries. Marilyn Monroe, the ultimate icon of Hollywood glamour, wasn't just the blonde bombshell who captivated millions. Behind her breathy voice and sparkling eyes lay a woman entangled in a web of dangerous liaisons, including, allegedly, ties to some of the most powerful mafia figures of her time. Monroe's connection to organized crime wasn't direct, but was dangerously adjacent. Her romantic entanglements with President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert placed her squarely within a circle where mob influence was not only present, but potent. The Kennedy family's alleged links to mob boss Sam Giancana and infamous Chicago mob fixer Johnny Rosselli put Marilyn in the orbit of men whose power extended far beyond politics. According to FBI files and later investigative reports, Monroe was considered a potential national security risk, not because of her movies, but because of what she might have known. Her phone was allegedly tapped. She was reportedly surveilled. And rumors swirled that she had been privy to pillow talk involving classified government secrets, potentially overheard or relayed to men with dangerous connections. One explosive theory, repeated in several documentaries and books, suggests that Monroe's death, officially ruled as a probable overdose, might have been more complicated. Some believe her knowledge of the Kennedy Mafia connection, or her threat to expose it, made her a liability. While there's no smoking gun, the overlapping timelines of her affairs, her mental breakdowns, and her sudden death have led many to question what really happened behind closed doors. Was Marilyn Monroe simply a tragic star consumed by fame and loneliness? Or was she a casualty of a deadly intersection between Hollywood, politics, and organized crime? Frank Sinatra, allegedly linked to Sam Giancana, Lucky Luciano, and the Chicago outfit. Frank Sinatra wasn't just a voice, he was the voice. The swagger, the suits, the stage presence, he defined cool for a generation. But behind the velvet voice and Rat Pack bravado was a shadowy trail of alleged connections to some of the most notorious mafia figures in American history. From the early 1940s, Sinatra was already rumored to be rubbing shoulders with mobsters. He reportedly had ties to Lucky Luciano, the father of modern organized crime, and Frank Costello, the so-called Prime Minister of the underworld. But it was his alleged relationship with Sam Giancana, the powerful boss of the Chicago outfit, that raised the most eyebrows. FBI surveillance reports and later biographies suggest that Sinatra wasn't just acquainted with these men, he was trusted. He performed at mob-run casinos, received favors that helped jumpstart his flagging film career in the 1950s, and is even rumored to have helped facilitate meetings between mafia figures and political players, most infamously the Kennedys. One theory that's been repeated in multiple investigative accounts alleges that Sinatra acted as a go-between for the Kennedy campaign and Giancana, possibly securing Union votes via mob influence in the 1960 election. Though never proven, the speculation was strong enough to get the FBI's attention, and Sinatra's file ran hundreds of pages long. His infamous temper, combined with an ironclad loyalty to certain shadowy figures, fueled the rumors for decades. He denied any involvement with the Mafia, calling it slander, yet he remained a fixture in venues controlled by organized crime, especially in Las Vegas. Perhaps the most enduring symbol of the speculation? The character Johnny Fontane in The Godfather, widely believed to be modeled after Sinatra, who allegedly reacted furiously to its implication, and may have pressured the film's production in real life. Whether he was a made man's favorite act or something more, Frank Sinatra's legacy is inseparable from the glittering lights of Hollywood and the darker corners of American organized crime. Dean Martin, allegedly connected to the Chicago outfit through performances and Rat Pack ties. Dean Martin, the king of cool, was the smooth crooner with a drink in his hand, a joke on his lips, and a voice that could melt a room. As one of the founding members of the Rat Pack, Martin exuded effortless charm. But behind the suave persona was a man allegedly entangled, knowingly or not, with the powerful web of organized crime, particularly the Chicago outfit. Martin's career flourished in Las Vegas, a city that, during his peak, was firmly under mob control. The casinos he performed in, like the Sands, the Riviera, and the Flamingo, were either owned or heavily influenced by mafia families. These weren't just venues. They were business fronts, money laundries, and territory for powerful men like Sam Giancana, who, according to several FBI documents, took a special interest in the Rat Pack's success. Unlike Frank Sinatra, who was known for heated confrontations and open mob allegiances, Martin kept a cooler distance. But that didn't mean he was untouched. According to various accounts from former casino insiders and authors like Nick Tosches, Martin was protected. Mobsters allegedly viewed him as one of theirs, not because he did business with them directly, but because he brought in crowds, made money for the right people, and didn't ask questions. He was reportedly close with Sinatra during the years when Sinatra's connections to Giancana were strongest. And Martin's own long-standing engagements at mob-linked clubs raised suspicions, not only among journalists but within the FBI, which kept an open file on him during the 1960s. Still, Martin played it smart. He rarely commented on anything personal, and even less about his Rat Pack circle. He was famously evasive, preferring golf and solitude to scandal and gossip. Whether that was by design or instinct, it kept him out of serious trouble, but never completely clear of the rumors. Dean Martin may have played the fool on stage, but in real life, he was no one's puppet. Whether knowingly complicit or just a beloved entertainer in the wrong places at the right time, he remains a lasting symbol of how glamour, music, and the mob sometimes walked the same stage. Sammy Davis Jr., allegedly connected through Las Vegas performances and Rat Pack alliances. Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most electrifying entertainers of the 20th century. A true triple threat, singer, dancer, actor, he broke barriers as a black performer in a segregated America, often doing it with charm, fire, and sheer talent. But as his star rose, especially through his membership in the Rat Pack, Davis found himself navigating a world where the lines between show business and organized crime were dangerously blurred. Davis's ties to the mob were not forged in backroom deals or direct associations, at least not publicly. But by proximity, and through the places he performed, he was unquestionably in the orbit of powerful mob figures. Las Vegas was central to his career, and in the 1950s and 60s, the casinos that booked him, the Sands, the Flamingo, the Desert Inn, were essentially mob territory. These weren't just glitzy performance halls, they were fronts for laundering, skimming, and organized criminal operations run by outfits from Chicago, New York, and Cleveland. The man who brought Sammy into this world? Frank Sinatra. And with Sinatra came access and exposure to figures like Sam Giancana, Mo Dalitz, and Johnny Rosselli. While Davis was reportedly treated with a mix of respect and tolerance by these men, his interracial relationships, especially his high-profile romances with white actresses like Kim Novak, and later his marriage to Swedish actress May Britt, put him at risk. According to multiple reports, including FBI documents and Hollywood memoirs, mobsters were deeply displeased by his defiance of social taboos and allegedly pressured him to end at least one of those relationships. Despite the danger, Davis pressed on. He endured threats, racism, and political backlash, and still packed theaters wherever he went. Some sources suggest that he was offered a kind of protection from mob figures who respected his talent, while others claim he simply knew how to survive in a rigged system without challenging the powers behind the curtain. Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't just performing under bright lights. He was dancing on a tightrope, balancing fame, race, and reputation in a city controlled by criminals. And in doing so, he became a symbol not just of showbiz excellence, but of survival in a world where one wrong move could cost everything. Elizabeth Taylor, allegedly linked through marriages, friendships, and the Rat Pack circle. Elizabeth Taylor was Hollywood royalty. With her violet eyes, commanding presence, and string of unforgettable roles, she wasn't just a movie star, she was the movie star. Her off-screen life was as dramatic as her film career. 8 marriages, countless headlines, and friendships that stretched from presidents to popes. But among the glittering names in her orbit were also a few with far darker reputations, including alleged ties to organized crime. Taylor was never directly connected to the Mafia in the way others on this list were. She wasn't meeting in smoky backrooms or taking favors from mob bosses. But her long-time associations, marriages, and proximity to key players in the Rat Pack, especially Frank Sinatra, placed her well within the sphere of influence where mobsters operated quietly behind the scenes. One of the clearest connections came through her husband Eddie Fisher, who had mob-linked bookings and performed in casinos under Mafia control. Later, during her high-profile marriage to Richard Burton, Taylor found herself often mingling with Sinatra and his powerful friends, many of whom, like Sam Giancana and Mickey Cohen, had serious underworld credentials. She dined with them, attended parties with them, and may have unknowingly shared space with some of the most dangerous men in America. There are also persistent rumors, never proven but widely reported, that Taylor was used as a high-profile draw for mob-owned events, her name adding legitimacy and glamour to shows, fundraisers, and casino openings quietly funded by organized crime. She may not have seen it, or she may have chosen not to. To complicate things further, her deep friendship with Michael Jackson later brought her into the company of security firms and fixers with alleged underworld connections, though by then she was more a living legend than a Hollywood operative. Elizabeth Taylor's brush with the Mafia wasn't about criminality, it was about access. She was so famous, so visible, that she became part of the scenery in a world where celebrity and crime often shared the same stage. Whether she was complicit, curious, or simply indifferent remains a mystery. But in the golden age of Vegas and Hollywood, no one, not even the queen of the silver screen, was too far removed from the men in the shadows. Tony Curtis, allegedly connected through family ties and long-standing mob associations. Tony Curtis was the picture of 1950s charm, slick hair, a chiseled face, and a magnetic presence on screen. From Some Like It Hot to Spartacus, he climbed from poverty in the Bronx to the pinnacle of Hollywood stardom. But behind the fame and the leading man persona was a background steeped in street life, one that included alleged connections to organized crime dating back to his childhood. Born Bernard Schwartz to poor Hungarian Jewish immigrants in New York City, Curtis grew up in a tough neighborhood where he was surrounded by gangs, street hustlers, and, as he would later admit, Mafia influence. In his own words, "I knew the wise guys. I grew up with them." And according to several biographers, one of those so-called wise guys was none other than Bugsy Siegel, the infamous mobster credited with building modern Las Vegas. Curtis claimed that his family knew Siegel personally when they lived in Brooklyn. While the depth of that connection is hard to verify, the story has persisted for decades, and Curtis never completely denied it. As his career skyrocketed, Curtis reportedly maintained ties to some of his old Bronx acquaintances, several of whom were known to have graduated from neighborhood rackets to full-fledged organized crime operations. In Hollywood and Las Vegas, Curtis moved in the same circles as Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and others with well-known mob affiliations. He performed in venues controlled by the mob, attended parties thrown by underworld-connected figures, and according to some accounts, relied on those ties to ensure safety and smooth dealings during his years in and out of Las Vegas. One persistent rumor, never confirmed, suggests that Curtis once received help from a mob-connected friend in resolving a dispute with a studio executive. Whether this was an exaggeration or a quiet favor remains part of the mystery that surrounded many stars of his era. Unlike others who distanced themselves from those connections later in life, Curtis often embraced the mystique. He played gangsters on screen, posed for photos with known underworld figures, and carried himself with the streetwise confidence of someone who never fully left the Bronx behind. Tony Curtis's story is a reminder that in mid-century America, the distance between poverty and stardom was often crossed by walking a very thin line, and sometimes by walking alongside very dangerous people. Peter Lawford, allegedly linked through the Kennedys, the Rat Pack, and mob middlemen. Peter Lawford was the polished English gentleman of the Rat Pack, suave, witty, and always impeccably dressed. With a charming accent and matinee idol looks, he fit neatly into the glitzy world of Hollywood's elite. But Lawford's story isn't just one of red carpets and cocktail parties. His life placed him at the exact intersection where Hollywood, politics, and the Mafia collided, and according to many accounts, he wasn't just a bystander. Lawford became the brother-in-law of John F. Kennedy after marrying Patricia Kennedy, and his role as both an actor and political insider made him uniquely valuable and uniquely vulnerable. He wasn't just a Rat Pack member performing alongside Sinatra, Martin, and Davis. He was the man tasked with managing the delicate dance between the Kennedys and the Mafia-connected entertainers who supported them. At the center of this triangle was Sam Giancana, the notorious Chicago outfit boss. During the 1960 presidential campaign, it was widely rumored and later supported by several investigative reports that the Kennedy camp, possibly through Sinatra and Lawford, sought help from Giancana to secure Union votes in key states. Lawford, with his access to both political and Hollywood circles, allegedly acted as a go-between, whether he intended to or not. These associations became deeply problematic after Kennedy took office. The White House began aggressively targeting organized crime, and suddenly the very men who allegedly helped JFK get elected felt betrayed. According to multiple sources, including Sinatra's own biographers, it was Lawford who delivered the crushing message to Sinatra that President Kennedy would not be staying at his Palm Springs compound, a cancellation that infuriated Sinatra and effectively ended Lawford's relationship with the Rat Pack. Lawford's fall from grace was steep. Shunned by Sinatra and humiliated in public, he spiraled into alcohol and drug use. Some believe the weight of the secrets he carried, from his role in Kennedy's inner circle to the alleged Mafia negotiations, haunted him for the rest of his life. Peter Lawford never publicly acknowledged any criminal connections, but he was at the very heart of one of the most explosive and shadowy alliances in American history, a web of influence where movie stars, mobsters, and presidents all played their parts, and where one wrong move could end a career or worse. Jerry Lewis, allegedly connected through Vegas circuits and mob-run venues. Jerry Lewis was a comedy legend, wild, unpredictable, and one of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment for decades. His slapstick routines, rubber-faced expressions, and partnership with Dean Martin made him a household name. But while Lewis made people laugh on screen, behind the scenes, he was working in a world where not everyone had a sense of humor, a world that, during his peak, was tightly controlled by the Mafia. Lewis's alleged ties to organized crime didn't come through criminal activity or personal alliances, but rather through the venues that defined his career. From the 1950s through the 1970s, much of Lewis's work, both solo and with Dean Martin, was centered in Las Vegas, a city whose entertainment business was thoroughly infiltrated by organized crime. Casinos like the Sands, the Riviera, and the Tropicana were more than glamorous night spots. They were controlled by syndicates from Chicago, Cleveland, and New York, with mobsters like Mo Dalitz, Sam Giancana, and Johnny Rosselli pulling strings behind the scenes. Jerry Lewis was a mainstay in these venues, headlining sold-out shows and drawing massive crowds, which made him valuable. According to some insider accounts, including memoirs by Vegas insiders and former FBI agents, performers like Lewis were given protection, preferred bookings, and certain favors in exchange for remaining loyal, or at the very least, silent. Lewis was also close with Frank Sinatra, whose ties to organized crime were more overt. Through Sinatra and his Rat Pack performances, Lewis moved in circles where mob presence was common, if not openly discussed. Some sources even suggest Lewis may have known of backstage dealings involving payments, union issues, or venue arrangements that were handled by men with connections far beyond the world of entertainment. Still, Lewis maintained a relatively clean image, partly because his role was that of the comic relief, and partly because he was careful. He famously denied any criminal associations, and to this day, no formal links have ever been proven. But the reality of his environment was unavoidable. In the golden age of Las Vegas, when the mob ran the strip and entertainers danced to their rhythm, even the clowns had to know who was really in charge. And Jerry Lewis, whether he liked it or not, was performing on a stage built by the underworld. George Raft, allegedly deeply connected to Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, and the mob elite. George Raft wasn't just a star who played gangsters on screen. He was one of the rare Hollywood figures whose real-life ties to organized crime were not just rumored, but well-documented and widely acknowledged. To many in law enforcement, Raft wasn't acting. He was simply playing a version of himself. Born and raised in New York's Hell's Kitchen, Raft grew up in a world of street gangs, dance halls, and early Prohibition-era crime. Long before he became a film star, he was a taxi dancer and small-time hustler, reportedly running errands and doing side work for real-life gangsters. Among his childhood acquaintances, Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky, two men who would go on to become foundational figures in the American Mafia. As Raft's acting career took off in the 1930s, particularly with films like Scarface, 1932, where he played a cold-blooded killer, so did the rumors about his underworld loyalties. And unlike many stars who distanced themselves from such claims, Raft didn't seem to care. He was seen in public with Siegel. He openly associated with Owney Madden, Frank Costello, and Joe Adonis. According to FBI files, he was once present at a meeting of major mob figures, not as an entertainer, but as an equal at the table. His mob ties reportedly cost him roles. He famously turned down the lead in Maltese Falcon, a decision many believe was influenced by his desire to avoid playing certain kinds of characters that hit too close to home. Later, when his film career waned, Raft became involved in running casinos in Havana and Las Vegas, some of which were directly operated or financed by mobsters. He wasn't just performing, he was managing operations. Law enforcement kept a close eye on him for years. In one incident, Raft was denied entry to the UK because of his known associations. In another, he was questioned in relation to the murder of a known mobster, though he was never charged. Raft often denied being involved in criminal activities, insisting he was just loyal to childhood friends. But those friendships came with a price. They defined his image, followed him throughout his career, and ultimately blurred the line between reality and performance in a way few stars ever experienced. George Raft didn't just know gangsters. According to many accounts, he helped protect them, worked with them, and, in some ways, was one of them. In Hollywood history, no other actor walked the line between screen legend and underworld insider quite like he did. Lana Turner, allegedly entangled through her relationship with mob enforcer Johnny Stompanato. Lana Turner was one of the most glamorous stars of the 1940s and 50s, a true Hollywood siren, with the kind of screen presence that stopped audiences in their tracks. But Turner's most infamous role wasn't in a film. It was in a real-life scandal that linked her directly to the violent world of organized crime and to one of the most shocking events in old Hollywood history. Her alleged connection to the mob came through Johnny Stompanato, a known enforcer and bodyguard for Los Angeles mob boss Mickey Cohen. Stompanato was charming, dangerous, and possessive, and in 1957, he began a passionate and volatile relationship with Turner. The romance was as toxic as it was public. Turner, then at the peak of her career, was drawn into a storm of jealousy, threats, and alleged abuse behind the scenes. Stompanato was no ordinary suitor. He had a reputation as a violent fixer, involved in illegal gambling, extortion, and working muscle for Cohen's various rackets. According to police reports and later court testimony, he often boasted about his underworld ties and used them to intimidate Turner and control her career decisions. Some accounts claim he threatened directors and producers who worked with her, attempting to insert himself into her professional life as well. Everything came to a head on the night of April 4, 1958, when Stompanato was fatally stabbed in Turner's Beverly Hills home. The shocking twist: the person holding the knife was Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, who claimed she acted in defense of her mother during a violent argument. The case was ruled justifiable homicide, but the media frenzy that followed was relentless. Though Turner was never charged, her name became inseparable from the mob drama that surrounded Stompanato's life and death. Her personal connection to a known mob enforcer, coupled with the violent climax of their relationship, cast a long shadow over her legacy. Some biographers believe Mickey Cohen himself kept Turner under quiet protection afterward, ensuring her safety while keeping the scandal from spiraling into retribution. Others speculate the mob saw the case as closed, a personal matter too public to pursue. Regardless of what happened behind closed doors, Lana Turner's story stands as one of the most dramatic intersections of Hollywood glamour and organized crime. It wasn't a film noir. It was real, and it left a lasting mark on both her career and the mythology of Tinseltown's dark side. Judy Garland, allegedly entangled through performances and personal relationships. Judy Garland, the voice behind Over the Rainbow, was the embodiment of old Hollywood brilliance and heartbreak. A child star turned global icon, Garland captivated audiences with her raw emotional power and vulnerability. But behind the scenes, her life was a whirlwind of industry exploitation, addiction, and, as some accounts suggest, troubling brushes with organized crime. Garland never had direct criminal affiliations, but her life intersected with the shadowy world of mob-connected venues and figures, especially during the later years of her career, when she found herself financially unstable and desperate for work. Many of the nightclubs, theaters, and hotels where she performed, in New York, Chicago, and especially Las Vegas, were controlled or influenced by the Mafia. These were the very places she returned to repeatedly, lured by fast cash and loyal audiences. In the 1950s and 60s, Garland is believed to have performed at multiple mob-run establishments, including venues operated by Frank Costello and Mickey Cohen's extended network. She may not have negotiated directly with these men, but she almost certainly worked under the umbrellas they controlled. According to accounts from industry insiders, bookings were sometimes arranged through third parties with underworld connections, and stars in Garland's position, especially those in financial distress, didn't ask too many questions. Her romantic life also drew rumors. Some biographers and tabloid reports from the era suggested she had brief associations with men linked to organized crime, though details remain murky and often speculative. In a time when women were often isolated from the business side of the industry, Garland may have been used more than involved. What makes her story even more tragic is the sense that she may have been vulnerable to manipulation, a star constantly fighting for respect, money, and control, often surrounded by handlers and gatekeepers whose loyalties weren't always clear. Garland's brushes with the mob weren't as overt as others on this list, but they form part of a larger pattern. A troubled star at the mercy of forces far bigger than herself, in an era when Hollywood dreams were sometimes financed from the shadows. Robert Mitchum, allegedly associated through Hollywood's party scene and underworld social circles. Robert Mitchum was the very definition of rugged cool, tall, brooding, with a voice that could melt steel, and a glare that belonged in every film noir ever made. On screen, he played drifters, tough guys, and outlaws with ease. Off-screen, he lived with the same defiance. But behind his smoldering indifference was a life that allegedly brushed up against the edges of organized crime, particularly through his time in post-war Hollywood's party scene, where the mob was never far away. Mitchum was no stranger to scandal. In 1948, he was famously arrested in a now infamous marijuana sting, a moment that could have ended most careers but somehow only enhanced his rebellious image. What many don't know is that the circles he ran in during that period often overlapped with people connected to the underworld. He frequented clubs and social gatherings known to be hangouts for LA-based mobsters, including venues under the influence of the Mickey Cohen organization. According to some Hollywood insiders and reporters at the time, Mitchum had a reputation for partying hard with people who had friends in low places, gamblers, enforcers, and shadowy figures with ties to illegal rackets. Whether it was intentional or simply the byproduct of being Hollywood's resident bad boy, Mitchum's proximity to these people didn't go unnoticed. There were also persistent rumors that, like many actors of the era, Mitchum had been quietly protected by mob-affiliated figures, particularly after his drug arrest. Some speculated that pressure was applied behind the scenes to soften the blow of his sentencing or to ensure the press didn't destroy his career. Nothing was ever proven, and Mitchum never publicly acknowledged such help. In fact, he wore his prison sentence like a badge of honor. Despite his rough edges, Mitchum was notoriously private and avoided the Rat Pack-style publicity that tied others more directly to organized crime. But he lived on the fringes, in the smoky rooms at the late-night clubs, with the kinds of people who didn't make the gossip columns, but who ran the town in their own way. Robert Mitchum's ties to the Mafia may have been more implied than proven, more whispered than written, but in the shadowy world of 1940s and 50s Hollywood, where charm and danger often went hand in hand, his legend fits right in. Mickey Rooney, allegedly protected by Bugsy Siegel during a studio dispute. Mickey Rooney was once the biggest star in Hollywood, literally. During the late 1930s and early 40s, he was the highest-paid actor in America, with a boyish charm that made him beloved by audiences and a bankable force for the studios. But behind the wholesome image of Andy Hardy and musical comedies was a life filled with gambling, womanizing, and alleged ties to one of the most feared mobsters of all time, Bugsy Siegel. Rooney's connection to the mob wasn't through crime or criminal activity, but through a friendship, or perhaps a quiet arrangement, with Siegel, the brutal visionary behind the birth of modern Las Vegas. According to multiple Hollywood biographies and mob histories, Rooney was allegedly protected by Siegel during a dangerous dispute with a powerful movie studio executive. The story goes that Rooney, who is known for his explosive temper and off-screen antics, got himself into serious trouble. Siegel reportedly stepped in, with a phone call or something more, and the problem went away. Rooney himself hinted at such connections in interviews later in life, claiming that friends in high places once kept him safe. Whether he was exaggerating or admitting more than he realized, the rumors persisted. Bugsy Siegel wasn't in the business of making casual threats, and for someone of Rooney's stature to invoke his name suggests a level of familiarity most stars would never risk. Rooney's lifestyle also raised eyebrows. He was a notorious gambler, often deep in debt, and frequently performed in mob-controlled venues in Las Vegas, including the Flamingo, the casino Siegel himself helped build. Sources from that era say Rooney's debts were sometimes taken care of quietly, and some speculate that favors were exchanged, not in the form of criminal deals, but by simply being the draw, the face, the name that kept audiences coming. Unlike many of his peers, Rooney never fell completely out of favor. He kept working for decades, moving from leading man to character actor, always with a hint of mischief in his eyes. Whether his survival in such a brutal industry was due to talent, luck, or a quiet handshake from one of America's most notorious gangsters, we may never know. But one thing is certain, Mickey Rooney's boy-next-door image may have been the perfect disguise for a man who knew exactly who to call when the studio lights went dark and the shadows closed in. Tony Bennett, allegedly connected through performances at mob-controlled venues. Tony Bennett, the smooth-voiced crooner behind classics like I Left My Heart in San Francisco, was beloved by millions for his elegance and vocal artistry. But during the golden age of Las Vegas and nightclub circuits, Bennett, like many performers of his era, worked in venues that were quietly and sometimes openly controlled by organized crime. His connection to the Mafia wasn't personal or criminal, it was professional proximity. He frequently performed at casinos and nightclubs in Las Vegas, Chicago, and New York, many of which were operated or financed by mob families like the Chicago Outfit and Genovese crime family. These were high-paying gigs, and for entertainers, they were hard to turn down. In interviews later in life, Bennett acknowledged that mobsters often ran the venues where he sang. He stopped short of naming names but said they were there, everybody knew it. While there's no evidence he was ever involved in illegal activity or sought protection, the arrangement was clear. The mob controlled the stage, and performers like Bennett kept the crowds coming. Bennett maintained a clean reputation, focusing on music and largely avoiding scandal. But his career, like many others of the time, was built on stages funded from the shadows, where the applause came from the front row, and the real power sat just out of sight. Joey Bishop, allegedly connected through Rat Pack ties and mob-run Vegas venues. Joey Bishop, the quick-witted comedian and MC of the Rat Pack, was often seen as the quietest member of the group, but his presence in mob-connected circles was undeniable. As Sinatra's go-to comic and the man who often hosted their shows, Bishop worked regularly in Las Vegas casinos controlled by powerful mob interests, including the Chicago Outfit and Cleveland Syndicate. He wasn't flashy or reckless, but like his Rat Pack brothers, he performed night after night on mob-run stages, the Sands, the Flamingo, and the Riviera, to name a few. According to FBI reports from the era, Bishop was friendly with known organized crime figures, though no wrongdoing was ever linked directly to him. Unlike Sinatra or Martin, Bishop kept a lower profile. He rarely partied publicly, didn't engage in open mob talk, and focused on his work. Still, being part of the Rat Pack meant walking among men like Sam Giancana and Mo Dalitz, whether you wanted to or not. Joey Bishop may have been the most understated of the group, but he knew exactly who was behind the curtain in Las Vegas. And like so many performers of the time, he kept the jokes coming, while the real bosses watched from the shadows. James Cagney, allegedly targeted and later protected by mob figures. James Cagney, Hollywood's original tough guy, built his career playing gangsters, but in real life, he reportedly got a little too close to the real thing. Known for films like Public Enemy and Angels with Dirty Faces, Cagney wasn't just portraying mobsters, he was allegedly being watched by them. In the 1930s, Cagney caught the attention of mob-affiliated union leaders, particularly within Hollywood's grip and labor unions, some of which were influenced by the mob-run International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, IATSE. He refused to play along, and according to FBI files and his own autobiography, he faced threats because of it. One story that's circulated for decades claims that George Raft, Cagney's real-life friend, and an actor with deep mob ties, once stepped in to stop a hit that had been ordered on Cagney over a labor dispute. Raft allegedly told the would-be attackers to back off, saving Cagney's life and earning his lasting gratitude. Though Cagney never collaborated with the mob, his career took him through a time when even resisting their influence was dangerous. He stood his ground, publicly denouncing the corruption he saw, and by most accounts, walked away clean, though not untouched. James Cagney played gangsters on screen. Off-screen, he had the guts to stand up to the real thing. Virginia Hill, directly connected as a mob courier and lover of Bugsy Siegel. Virginia Hill wasn't a movie star in the traditional sense, but she became a household name in Hollywood and mob history for one explosive reason: her intimate and highly publicized relationship with Bugsy Siegel, one of the most feared and flamboyant gangsters of the 20th century. A former actress and socialite, Hill was far more than just a glamorous companion. She was a trusted courier and money runner for the Chicago Outfit, allegedly ferrying large sums of cash across the country for mob bosses like Frank Nitti and Tony Accardo. Her nickname inside the syndicate? The Flamingo. It was that nickname and her influence over Siegel that reportedly led to the naming of the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, the mob's first major casino project. Though Siegel fronted the operation, insiders believe Hill played a role behind the scenes, possibly helping move funds or smoothing political connections. Their relationship was fiery and violent, filled with passion, public arguments, and alleged beatings. After Siegel was assassinated in 1947, Hill's name became a fixture in the media. She was questioned repeatedly during the Kefauver hearings, where she famously deflected questions with dry humor and open disdain for government officials. But few doubted her insider knowledge of the mob's financial operations. Virginia Hill didn't just brush up against organized crime. She was in it. She lived alongside it, profited from it, and survived longer than many of the men she worked with. And in the strange overlap between Hollywood glamour and mob violence, she played her role to perfection, both on stage and off. Eddie Fisher, allegedly connected through performances in mob-controlled clubs. Eddie Fisher was one of America's most popular crooners in the 1950s, a clean-cut heartthrob with a golden voice, millions of record sales, and a string of high-profile relationships, including marriages to Debbie Reynolds and later Elizabeth Taylor. But behind the teen idol image, Fisher's career was closely tied to a performance circuit long associated with organized crime. Fisher regularly sang at nightclubs and casinos in Las Vegas, Chicago, and New York, many of which were under the control of mafia families, particularly the Chicago Outfit and the Genovese crime family. Like many entertainers of the era, his bookings were often arranged through figures who operated on both sides of the law. While Fisher was never accused of criminal involvement, his name appeared in FBI files due to his work in mob-connected venues. According to some reports, he was friendly with several underworld figures who frequented his shows and allegedly helped facilitate performance deals. Some biographers suggest he was pressured to perform at certain events, a common tactic used by the mob to lend credibility and draw crowds to their establishments. Fisher, who struggled with addiction and career instability in later years, never publicly discussed any mafia connections. But his presence in mob-controlled showrooms and the circles he moved in during his peak placed him firmly in the company of those who ran the darker side of show business. Eddie Fisher may have sung about love and heartbreak, but some of his biggest performances came on stages built by people who preferred loyalty, not lyrics, and who always made sure their stars showed up on time. Vic Damone, allegedly threatened by the mob and protected by Frank Costello. Vic Damone had one of the smoothest voices of his generation, a romantic crooner who was often compared to Sinatra for his vocal style and stage presence. But unlike many of his peers, Damone's brush with the Mafia wasn't just about where he performed. It was personal, and it nearly cost him his life. The story, which Damone himself recounted in interviews and in his autobiography, goes back to the 1950s when he refused to honor a performance contract for a club allegedly connected to organized crime. According to Damone, this decision didn't sit well with the club's owners, one of whom had direct ties to the Lucchese or Genovese crime family in New York. Shortly afterward, Damone claimed he was abducted by mobsters, taken for a ride, and had a gun put to his head. The message was clear. He had disrespected the wrong people. But before anything could happen, Damone said a call was made to none other than Frank Costello, one of the most powerful mafia bosses in America at the time. Costello reportedly ordered Damone be let go, saying, "He's a good kid. Let him go." That decision may have saved his life. Damone never denied the encounter, though he downplayed any deeper involvement with the Mafia. Still, his story circulated widely in mob lore and became one of the more striking examples of how even a simple career decision could turn deadly when the wrong people were involved. Vic Damone continued to perform for years in mob-run venues in Las Vegas and Miami, and like many others, maintained a professional silence about the world he sometimes walked through. But the threat he faced, and the name that saved him, is a reminder of how deeply entangled show business and the mob truly were. Bugsy Siegel, directly connected to Hollywood's elite and the creation of mob-run Las Vegas. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel wasn't a Hollywood star, but he was treated like one. Suave, dangerous, and strikingly charismatic, Siegel was one of the most feared mobsters of the 1930s and 40s. But unlike many of his underworld peers, he wasn't content to operate in the shadows. Bugsy liked to be seen, especially in Hollywood. Siegel made Los Angeles his playground. He lived in Beverly Hills through extravagant parties and was a regular at exclusive nightclubs and studio backlots. He dated actresses, made friends with producers, and was frequently photographed alongside A-listers. His most famous relationship was with Virginia Hill, a socialite with connections in both Hollywood and organized crime. What made Siegel so important to this list was his unique role in bridging the gap between the Mafia and the entertainment industry. He wasn't just connected to stars, he financed the spaces where they performed. In the 1940s, Siegel spearheaded the development of the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, one of the first luxury casinos on the Strip. It was a mob-backed operation designed to attract celebrities, gamblers, and high rollers alike, and it worked. Soon, everyone from Frank Sinatra to Lana Turner was appearing in Las Vegas, helping turn the desert into a neon playground, bankrolled by organized crime. Siegel's personal friendships included stars like George Raft, who reportedly helped him make inroads into Hollywood society. Siegel wasn't just a criminal who liked movies. He was a celebrity mobster, a man whose charm and brutality made him welcome in rooms few gangsters ever entered. His murder in 1947, shot through the window of Hill's Beverly Hills home, sent shockwaves through both the underworld and Hollywood. It wasn't just the end of a gangster. It was the end of an era where one man could command fear in New York, build an empire in Nevada, and still sip cocktails with the biggest stars in California. Bugsy Siegel may not have acted in a single film, but he shaped the stage for all who did, and left behind a legacy where crime, fame, and power blended under the same spotlight. In the golden age of Hollywood, the line between fame and fear was razor thin. The stars we adored on screen often danced just inches from danger, knowingly or not, entangled in a world where the price of success was silence, loyalty, or survival. For some, the mob was a shadowy presence in the background. For others, it was in the dressing room, backstage, or even at the dinner table. These weren't just stories, they were lives lived under the lights and in the shadows. And in Hollywood, as in the underworld, the show always went on, whether you wanted it to or not. If you found this dive into old Hollywood's darkest corners as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story from the hidden side of fame. More untold truths, forgotten legends, and secrets of the stars are just around the corner. Until then, stay curious and stay in the spotlight.